Hello again, Steve here with a few comments about not giving up, and hopefully this is helpful for those who run into challenges in their life and challenges that, although you don't want, you still want the results of what you were going for, but it seems like giving up is the easier route to go. And yeah, I can relate because lots of times in my life I'd like to give up and have given up on certain projects and whatnot. Generally, I find there are things that are not really that important. If they're really important, even if I give up in the short term, that desire reoccurs and I get back into it at some point. And this has been the case in the whole self help field and so on. And, there's always challenges, of course. So I'm just going to, come across, just put forward a few ideas that might be helpful for those to help us all, whoever's listening to this, the five people who are listening to this, to put forth their um, to put on our thinking caps in a way and think about possibility rather than just seeing the roadblock. I used to subscribe to this guy, Gary Halbert, years ago, and he talked a lot about um, making sure that you have a market. And don't be afraid to say, okay, I've gone into that direction and it seems to be a roadblock. But rather than abandon the whole thing, how about an alternative market? He used to use the example of, if you figure out that you're having a hard time selling ice to Eskimos, there might be a good reason for that. It might be that there's nothing wrong with your product, nothing wrong with you per se. It might be that they have already a lot of ice, you know. Or another example he used one time was he had a guy who was a building contractor, and he was trying to get Gary to help him out, to help him to figure out how to get more work for his building contracting. And what he found was that the guy was in a town, like sort of a one horse town, a one industry town or whatever, and that industry closed up shop. And Gary was, he was the kind of guy, he was sort of a tough love kind of guy, and he said, "Look, your local economy is in a nosedive. Like, why bother trying to figure out there? Why not figure out a place where there is a healthy demand for what you do and go there? As at least one possibility." So, yeah, that wouldn't be giving up. That was not giving up on the whole thing, right? It's like rejigging. It's like when you have a failure. When we have a failure, if you think of a failure as falling down, right? Like we put up a fence and it falls down. Well, whatever we're trying to do, if we fall down upon it, if we fall towards more success than rather into disaster, then that can be helpful. So that comes down to constantly rejigging what it is that we're doing towards greater success. So wherever we see we run into trouble, okay, if you're walking along a street, say, or a path, and there's a block in the way, well, then figuring out how to get around it. Maybe that, if there hadn't been that block, there would have been greater difficulty. Whereas maybe that's a wake-up call to rejig and to look. By the way, if there's a noise comes on right away here on the other side of the wall, there's water pipes. So if it starts roaring, that's what it is. So yeah. And the other thing that somebody once told me, and this guy is, I respect him for his business success, even though he's got his own problems in his life and stuff like that. But one thing for sure is he has been very successful in business. And one of the things he told me one time is one of the secrets to his success is just outliving everybody else's ideas. Like, he realizes he's not the best necessarily at what he does, but what he does have is staying power. And he says that if you run into trouble sometimes just waiting it out, because certain troubles are just temporary. Like he used the example of one big customer they had who had this person running that department who was just a real, gas bag basically. He couldn't tried to stymie everything they proposed and what have you. And I don't know, he just waited it out until she died or something. And then somebody else went in there and it was a completely different situation. So rather than get angry at it, he just kind of went on to other customers and serviced what he could there. But then once the opportunity presented itself that this person had moved on, that was an opportunity to go back in and reinvigorate that part of the business. Um, so yeah, I think that provided that there's a market for what we're doing, and you know that we can keep putting out the message over and over and over again. Because I mean, sometimes I get down on myself, like how could anybody want this Inner Genie project and so on. And yet, I had coffee with a guy yesterday. He's an executive for a fairly local but known and fairly successful company locally. And he was nice enough to go for coffee with me. We chatted about these sorts of things. And he signed up for what it is I have to offer. I mean, it was pretty amazing. And one of the reasons why was because before we went for coffee, he checked out my online presence and stuff. And while he agreed that it could use improvement, and I'm the first to admit that, he was just amazed at the quantity of material out there that I've got. Over 1,000 YouTube videos and a website with multiple blog sites attached to it, and Facebook and multiple Facebook pages, and epic walk of 8,000 kilometers for freedom, and so on and so on. And then a book link where you can see not just a book, but numerous books that I've written over the years, like this one and this one and this one, and oh yeah, that is my picture from years and years ago, and this one, which is close to 600 pages to back up my walk. And then there's a workbook that he was quite interested. This is what he was interested in mostly. Kick-ass confidence through public speaking. A compendium for anybody who wants personal health, nutrition, and exercise from back in the day when I was a nutritional, and not so much a nutritional, more of an exercise personal trainer, I guess you'd say it. And then a fairly substantial book on Coffee Chat, a local discussion group that went on for years that was well known locally. So, though I would wish greater inroads into the market of what I'm approaching, just the quantity, and that's an example of this final lesson that I'm learning, that I learned from this guy in terms of his verbalization of it, but I didn't completely learn it from him. He more sort of reinforced that, which I was already kind of doing. In other words, I wrote the basis of this book, getting close to 30 years ago now. I mean, that picture of me there is, my early 20s. And so it's been it's gone through several incarnations, and once again, failing into something that's more successful perhaps. In the beginning, it was about, I advertised that in the Toronto Globe and Mail, can you believe it? And then, eventually grew the basis of this book had to do with a weight loss program called Flat Belly Feeling, which, had, I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 subs way back in the day when I should have got into YouTube, back in the mid 2000s, and worldwide, and it's in fact right on the back of it, and also I was I was a subject of censorship back, because it says that this information was banned by Google, and it was way back then, believe it or not. But testimonials from people all over the world for the success that they've had as a result of that. So, not to toot my horn or anything like that, but it's just a call out to those who would want to give up, I guess, especially if you've got a big dream and it's an important dream. So, for example, I'm in the process right now of doing my best to fail towards success. Not trying to fail, but to try to rejig things towards greater success. Like, how can this be more successful? How can I get it in front of more people? How can I continue to, have a livelihood and adjust this beneficially? So I'm looking at those ideas right now. And this gentleman I talked to yesterday was very, very helpful. Put me in touch with another successful individual in the city who does alternative health and what have you. So constantly looking for better ways to do it is part of the solution, I think, to not giving up. It kind of reinvigorates ourselves because we get to see, oh wow, I never thought of that. And it gives us that enthusiasm to run in that direction for a little bit and, ferret out what can be gleaned there. But in the process, if we can keep on putting out value, putting out the valuable offers, and not get hung up on the individual criticisms and the put downs and so on that will inevitably come along in a similar way to this friend of mine who had this this person putting all kinds of roadblocks, but it was just one customer or one account. So he just sort of left it alone and realized that, you know what, he's probably going to outlive her energy to be that negative. And sure enough, that individual moved on, so he's able to go back in and give more value to those who do appreciate it. And I come at this with a bit of experience too, having been involved in various different organizations, having built several businesses and so on. And it's about putting the time in and having patience. That's another one too, is having patience enough and having faith enough, but not just blind faith. Recognizing that there is value based on seeing people involve themselves in something similar and be willing to participate and pay for it and however their participation shows up. Those sort of acknowledgements that there is value, when we realign ourselves to create that value and make our value visible. Make our value visible. One last little story here. It's being willing and able to take up those opportunities when they come. When I wrote this book, Optimum Health, back well over 20 years ago now, you can find it still in used bookstores online. Optimum Health by Stephen Maloney. This one, the rest of them are by Steve. But anyways, this one was by Stephen. Anyway, back in the day when I wrote this, the largest radio talk show host in Vancouver, Rafe Mayer at the time, his show, for some reason, they got wind that I had written this book, local author, etc. And it was in the local libraries. They were going to have a talk shows themed around health and well-being and what have you. And they called me up, or somehow they got in contact with me, I forget how. And they asked me if I could be on the show in the following morning, as an author to present what it is that I learned and so on, as a personal trainer at the time. And you know what I said? I said, nope, won't do it. And when I think about that now, it's completely outrageous. And I, told this guy that story yesterday when I was having coffee with him, and he was completely surprised. But I said, no, I was unable to. At least I perceived myself to be unable to. I had no experience of going in front of people and presenting something. And the idea at the time of going in front of potentially 1 million people who would be listening to that talk show was just completely inconceivable. If you read the back of this book, actually, I talk a little bit about that. This is the kick-ass confidence in public speaking. It says here, it's talking about me. Anxiety plagued him for many years, to the point where he would often get drunk in order to talk to others, especially women. Not surprisingly then, with such a debilitation for most of his life, even the thought of public speaking was out of the question. To him, people who could strut their stuff on stages, or in the case of a radio talk show, same thing, who could strut their stuff on stages as public speakers were like a species unknown. That's where I was, and so I had those opportunities. I was putting out the content, but I couldn't really present it very well, at least publicly. It was kind of a shame in a way, but as a result, I was able to write this after 9 years now of public speaking training. So anyways, that's the water pipes running next door, and it's hard for me to predict when that's going to start. So the roar in the background's not conducive to having further conversation. So I'll sign off for now. And once again, if you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And by all means, visit innergenie.com and send me a message there if you want more information on the Inner Genie project. Okay? We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.